Time. We only have so much with each other. And in a blink of an eye, it's gone. So we take the time to invest in all generations before we all lose our marbles.
If it's your first time here, we're glad you joined us during this season that we're in. You caught us halfway through our series on losing our marbles. Someone's losing their marbles right now, but that's totally fine. You're fine. We're glad you joined us because we believe that this series that we're in, this Losing Our Marbles series, is not just going to be life transformational, but we believe it's also going to be essential to transforming our church community as well, as we see what God's doing with us and going forward with these next few years ahead. You've heard this a few times. I hope it's coming very loud and clear through our sermons that we have a new vision here at Dayspring, a new vision statement that is driving what we're doing. Now, a vision statement is not something like a goal we're going to accomplish, but it's something way out in the distance that we probably will never get to. But it's going to be kind of like a North Star that we're always going to move in that direction. So here's our vision statement. If you take open your worship folder, there's some sermon notes. I want you to write this down because you're going to hear this a lot over the next few months ahead. Our vision for Dayspring is following the example of Jesus. We convey value to all people in every phase of life. I think you might ad nauseum are hearing the word value, 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 and that's why this sermon series about losing your marbles is happening. It's based upon this idea that in this jar, there is one marble for each week in the life of a child from birth until they leave your home. So about 18 years worth of marbles. And every week in your house, you take one more out, one more out, one more out, till eventually they're gone and you've lost your marbles. Some of you lost it on the way, but for the sake of our conversation, you lost your opportunities to really invest in them while you had them in your home. And we also believe that this is a microcosm of all of our lives. Our lives are a jar, and there's marbles in there representing every one of the weeks of our lives. So as each week in our life passes, one more marble goes away, and eventually we all lose our marbles. We lose opportunities to invest in people and to be invested in. So our responsibility right now as the body of Christ is to invest as much as we can until our last breath, until I've lost all my marbles, until you've lost all your marbles. So 3 weeks ago, Pastor Chuck spoke about adding value to our kids. And 2 weeks ago, Pastor Chuck spoke on showing value to millennials. To youth. Last week, I spoke about showing value to millennials. I'm here, folks. And then next week, we're going to talk again about showing value to boomer generation and beyond. But for today, we're going to talk about one more generation locked in the middle there. It's a generation of people that were born between the years, these are all approximate, between the years of 1965 and 1980. These are our Generation X. All right? Now, we believe it's important to talk about all these generations because if we're going to show value to generations, we've got to understand how they think and how they act, how they might respond to us. To better show value, we need to know how they will receive value. We need to better understand that so we know how best God can reach through us and with His hand touch their life and transform their relationship with Him and transform their eternity as well. Now, I also want to clear one thing up too. We had a lot of fun at the beginning of the service making fun and laughing a little about the millennials and what they are and what they aren't. But I want you to understand this. Before you get too critical or too lax about being careless about other generations, I want you to understand this. Generations are a social construct. They didn't cause themselves to be this way. All right? We had a lot of fun last week. We had fun at the expense of millennials talking about how they don't handle criticism all that well because from the time they were born, they got trophies just for participating, right? Who gave them those trophies, though? I didn't see any 5 and 7-year-olds going to the trophy store and buying trophies to hand out to each other. It was their boomer parents and their older Gen X parents We can get critical of the older generations because they don't do things the way we'd like, but before you get too critical of them, understand that they are the result of the society when they were being raised. Now, this isn't an excuse for how people act. This does not excuse careless or bad behavior, but it does explain why they do what they do and why they think the way they think and how they react the way they react because of the culture that they were raised and nurtured in, good or bad, is what it just was that way. So as we talk about Gen Xers this week and then the boomers and beyond next week, let's not be coming with a critical eye and thinking, oh, that's what's wrong. Oh, they're so wrong. Well, there's some things that are wrong, but everyone older than them had a hand in shaping the way Gen Xers think and feel and act. So let me introduce you now to the Gen Xers. And we're going to blast through these pretty quick up here to hopefully make some sense of when you're dealing with a Gen Xer, people approximately age, 38 till pushing, upper 50s? This is how they think, okay? They're pragmatic and self-reliant. Pragmatic means they do what works. Just because you say it works doesn't mean they're going to do it. They're self-reliant. They will find a way to make sure they accomplish things as suits them and the situation best. They'll work with you, but they won't work for you. Not a lot of loyalty in Gen Xers, all right? So they'll accomplish things, but they won't follow you just because you say, follow me, or they won't follow you just because you're the boss, or you're the pastor, or you're the parent. Nah, there's a lot more to it. If they can't see a reason for the task, they will question it over and over and over again. Give me a good reason. Why are we doing this way? And if they don't get a good reason, the self-reliant, pragmatic people that they are, they'll find their own way. Even though your way might have worked for the last 20 or 30 years. They'll make sure it works for them if it makes sense. They mistrust institutions. They mistrust government. They mistrust the church. They mistrust family. They mistrust they mistrust all that. We're going to see why in just a bit. They mistrust institutions. They're not intimidated by authority. They just don't care that you have it because you haven't proved anything to us. We'll do it our way. They're not intimidated by authority because they value skepticism and cynicism, and they have suspicion when it comes to boomers. Now, it doesn't mean, listen, this is a difference. They aren't just cynical people. They aren't just skeptical people. They value skepticism and cynicism. If you would have been in college while I was in college, we just loved to ask questions. We didn't care what the answers were. We just wanted to ask questions, just to ask questions. We sit in the dorm room or sit in the lobby and just challenge each other back and forth. I don't care what your answer is. I just love the fact that I'm skeptical. We valued it. Now, last week it was they and we when talking about millennials, but because I'm a Gen Xer, I'm a low end, I'm a younger Gen Xer. Today it's we, it's us and yuns. Yeah, you know what I mean. I went a little southern there. I'm not even from the South. A little bit of 3 years of Kentucky messed with me, okay? So why do you see this trend of negativity? Do you see that? Why is everything that we've just presented here so pessimistic or negative or skeptical or cynical or just really gloomy? Well, when you look and see what events shaped their lives, you may start to understand why we act the way we do. All right? Listen, when they were growing up, Watergate happened. And the government institution failed them. Who can you trust? Now, I wasn't alive for Watergate, but I was alive during the effects of Watergate. During the 70s, when a lot of us were growing up, there was the gas shortage and economic downturn where everyone started getting rid of it. It was lessening the job workforce where unemployment went through the roof. The economic system, the economic institution failed us. And we heard about it with mom and dad at home, trying to find the next paycheck, trying to find how do we pay for gas. We can't go to grandma and grandpa's now because there's no gas around. Economic institution failed us. This is a big difference. Last week we talked about the family with the millennials, where they're the first generation where divorce and single-parent families were the norm. Gen X was when divorce and single-parent families started happening because mom and dad both started working outside the house. This is not me saying it's wrong for moms and dads to both work, but this is the first generation of that where kids would come home from school and no one's at home. Mom used to always be at home. Now no one's at home. So you got to the house, you picked up the doormat, you got the key or went into the bush underneath there, you found the key, you let yourself in and sat at home, taking care of yourself. And on top of that, divorce was on the rise. Divorce grew. It became the norm. Single-parent homes became the norm. So it's not that it's uncommon now and people don't cope well now, but when you don't have any models for how to function without this, the family institution, the marriage institution failed them. Activism was a huge deal in the 70s. In some ways, the academic institution failed them for providing an environment where it could nurture pushing back against the big machines, acting out. And you had stuff like Kent State, where people died in these activist movements. They were ostracized by people because it was in many ways nurtured within these institutions. And so the institution of academia failed them by separating them from the rest of society. And then on top of that, while they were getting a little bit older, into the early 80s, you had the sexual infidelity of Jimmy Swaggart. You had all the embezzling done by religious leaders like Jim Baker. And you had these news stories start coming out about molestation by priests in the Catholic Church. And so the religious institution failed them. And when all these start failing you, is any wonder they start feeling cynical? Is any wonder you start wondering, who do I trust? Is any wonder they struggle to come to church? Because I know what you people are. I know you're like Jim Baker. You're like Jimmy Swaggart. You're like, by the way, they've all repented. And they've been making amends. Is it making sense? Kind of takes me back to my younger years. Back when I was growing up, I was one of 3 grandkids on my mom's side of the family. My brother, myself, my brother, and my sister. And my grandparents lived in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Didn't get to see them much. So to show value to us, they would fly each of us out one at a time during the summer to spend 1 week getting spoiled rotten by them. It was fantastic. I quit playing baseball. I love sports. I quit baseball to make sure I got that 1 week with grandma and grandpa. And it was all about me and all about us that week. They would take me downtown D.C. on the metro and look at the Capitol buildings and look at a museum or something. They'd take me, they'd take us to Chuck E. Cheese. Oh, we didn't have that in Amish country. Now, we never had pizza at Chuck E. Cheese. They couldn't stand that pizza. Pizza's pizza. 7-year-old, pizza's pizza. We went to Lito's Pizza, and then we went to Chuck E. Cheese and played games and blew all our money there. We went to an Baltimore Orioles baseball game every year. Grandpa loved baseball, so we went to a game. Oh, and every year, we would, every morning when I was there, I'd go out to the living room. I'd get to the Lazy Boy. I'd set up one of those TV tray tables. Go to the kitchen, get me a bowl of Super Golden Crisp. It's like pure sugar. And a honey bun. Now, I will tell you something. In my home, there was no sugar cereal. Once a year at my home, when it was your birthday, you got to pick out a cereal of your own, Lucky Charms, every year, all right? Always healthy stuff. And I never got to watch TV and eat, unless it was at Grandma and Grandpa's every single day. Super Golden Crisp, we called them Sugar Bears because he was a sugar bear on there. Honey buns, and TV. It was a life. I mean, day after day, shenanigan after shenanigan, hanging out with Grandma and Grandpa was living. Now, my grandpa also ran a little local lumber company there. And so it was also fun to go hang out with him at the lumber company. We would go there, and everyone it's like for the day you were the star. All the workers would talk to you, would just schmooze over you. I don't know if they were sucking up to grandpa or not. I didn't care. They made me the star for the day. And the best part of the day is that this was before computers and email and that. There's some computer stuff, but a lot of email stuff. They would do all the sales write-ups and they have to send it down to the shipping department. So they put in these tubes and you went, thump, thump. I just stood by the tubes all day, thump, sending them down. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch Elf. It's exactly the same thing. Now, one day, when I was 7, my grandpa had to stay late. He had to close some things down, do a few more papers, whatever. And so when you're a relatively social 7-year-old in a dark lumber company, you get bored fast. So I started exploring the aisles, and when I was done exploring the aisles, I saw a door. I'll explore that door. Door opened to downstairs, so I went downstairs. There's another door. So I thought, I'm going to explore this door. They're just begging me to open them. Opened up the door, and I was out the lumber yard to myself. Walking around the lumber, not a person in sight, and I saw this big pile of gravel. I'm pointing to my right because it was to my right when I went out the door. I'm going to explore that gravel pile. So I went over there, climbed up that gravel pile, got to the top, and there was this fence at the top. A 4-foot fence. Like, I can do 4-foot fence. I'm going to explore what's on the other side of that fence. Climbed the fence, and there's just stacks and stacks of wood all over the place. And when I was exploring these stacks and stacks of wood, these 2 Dobermans started exploring me. Why are you laughing? It was terrifying. I was 7. They were bigger than me, Michelle. Now, I recall it ending one way. Grandpa recalls it ending another way. Either way, I have no physical scars. I have emotional scars. But no physical scars. Somehow I got out. But from that day, my grandpa had to call my parents and say, I almost got your son killed. He felt like he failed me. Because just like millennials, everything that was set up to be secure failed me. He was there for me, but forgot about me, and so failed me. Those doors were supposed to be locked, and so the company failed me. That fence was supposed to keep people out, not keep 7-year-olds in. In a way, it failed me. And those dogs were really going to fail me soon if he didn't get out there to help. In that 20-minute time, I was failed because I was forgotten. Grandpa got so concerned with his work, and I think he's 89 or something now. I'm not upset at him at all for this. We talked about this. He got so consumed with getting his job done because he had to do his job. He forgot about me. Gen Xers, your parents got so concerned about making sure things were bad economically, so they had to put in more work. They wanted to make sure that you had enough to eat, but in that time, they got so concerned with making the money, in some ways, Gen Xers got forgotten. When their marriages started crumbling, they had to start dealing with each other, and many times you just got left behind. You're forgotten. The government was there to provide and protect you. But they had so many issues internally, they got to solve their own problems. They forgot to take care of this generation. Now again, this is not a blame. I want you to see that it is the forgetfulness because we are concerned of ourselves that causes these generations to form and develop, and there's consequences to it. But here's the real gift today, church. I was sitting here at that seat right there for about 4 hours Wednesday morning, knowing what this stuff was, saying, God, what am I going to talk about? Where's the connection biblically to all this? So I went to Pastor Dylan, and he knocked on his door, he let me come in. I said, Dylan, I just got to talk about this stuff. I got to make sense of what's God doing here. So we started talking, just throwing around, talking through the issues and the stuff, and all of a sudden, God said, there's this guy in 2 Samuel 9. I kid you not. Clear as day. It's like, there's this guy. There's this one story about him. There's reference a little before and reference a lot, but there's this one story about this one guy who was forgotten. And the way he responds is the response of a Gen Xer. And the way the hero of the story comes in and reacts is the reaction of how we as Dayspring show value to the Gen Xers God has placed around us. So I'm excited to share this story with you. Go ahead and turn your Bibles to 2 Samuel 9. Okay, if you would. I'll give you a second to do that. I'm not going to read it yet with you. I want to start telling the story and give you some background so you get what a crazy, incredible story this is. So it's the story of this boy, all right? He is he's the grandson of the king. So after his dad becomes king, he's going to be the king. His grandpa was King Saul. Now, understand, Saul wasn't a great guy all the time, so people were trying to kill him, trying to get to the throne, and so sometimes you can't get to Saul, you get to the next people. Well, his dad, Jonathan, was out in the army once, out in battle once, he got killed. So there's this little snippet, it's a sentence, but it's a sentence in a paragraph. In parentheses. It's like a little add-in in 2 Samuel 4:4 where it says, and there was this kid, the son of Jonathan, who after Jonathan was dead, basically they feared he's the next one because you want to keep offing the line of the king because when there's no one in the line of the king, anyone can become king. Whoever's the strongest gets to become king. So it says the nurse took him and started running off with him. My question at that moment is, well, I know dad's dead. Where's mom? Where's grandpa? Where's his family? The family institution had failed him. Left with just a nurse to care for him. In running, the nurse says, took this 5-year-old, started running with him, and she tripped and she fell and lost him. And when she fell and he fell, it says from that day, because of that fall, he was lame in both feet. He was probably a paraplegic from that moment on, at 5 years old. They ran as far as they could across the Jordan River to get the protection they needed, but that was the job of the government. That was the job of the king to provide and protect for his people. The government institution had failed him. So they live among security, taking care of themselves. Live in obscurity, caring for themselves. But where is the religious leaders that were placed there by God to take care of the widow, the orphan, and the alien? Here's an orphan. Where are you at? And so the religious institution had failed him too. This is a guy, although he's far before these things called Gen Xers, who experienced a life of being forgotten, abandoned by the institutions that were given by God to care for him. So naturally, he's a cynical, skeptical individual. We're going to see in our story in just a bit. So let's go down to the other hero of the story is King David. Now, background on David. David was born during the reign of King Saul. But King Saul wasn't a very good king, wasn't faithful to God. So the prophet Samuel goes and anoints David to be the next king of Israel, which is radical because he's not in the bloodline. David, in the process, forms a friendship. His best friend is Jonathan, the son of King Saul. I see a little conflict of interest here. Jonathan's next in line to be king. And he's best friend with the boy, to be a man who's going to take the throne from him. But Jonathan knew David's heart. He wanted to be obedient to God. And if God says, you're the next king and not me, I'm cool with it. We'll be friends. So they formed not just an acquaintance, they were brothers. Over time, Saul got jealous of David because David killed Goliath. David would take the army out and kill far more people and liberate far more people than King Saul ever did. Saul got jealous to the point where he wanted to kill David. Jonathan became aware of this. And there's a story about him and David meeting one last time together, planning David's escape. And in that moment of planning their escape, they make an oath. They make a covenant with each other. Jonathan's covenant is that I will help protect you from my father. And it says David and him made a covenant. We don't know what David's covenant was. It doesn't say in that story, but it says here. It makes sense here what he was saying. So next decade or so, David's out running around through the countryside. You would think that if he'd just kill Saul and get it over with, he'd be king. But he recognized that Saul was anointed by God before him to be that king. And he would not take the throne from Saul. So he just hid from Saul, ran from Saul for over a decade until Saul finally dies. And now in this story, David is king. And now David gets a chance to fulfill the covenant he made with Jonathan. Read with me. Here we go. 2 Samuel chapter 9, starting at 1. David asked, "Is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul whom I can show God's kindness to?" Ziba answered the king, "There's still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king said. Ziba answered, "He's at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar," which is several days' journey across the Jordan River. So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, say that a few times real fast, that's the boy's name. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth!" And he said, "At your service." "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I've given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants, you go farm that land and bring back the crops so your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants to go farm the land. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Let's get for a second in the mind of Mephibosheth. He's now for quite some time living distant, living in hiding. And he gets a knock on a door. And outside are a few of the king's soldiers and a king's messenger saying, "The king wants to see you." Now remember, when you're taking over from the bloodline of the king, you're taking the throne, you want to make sure no one supersedes your throne. More times than not, you want to have everyone that's descendant of that king killed, because then no one can make a claim to your throne. So if some of David's soldiers are showing up your door, naturally it's going through his head, they're going to take me to the castle, they're going to take me to the palace and kill me. I can't run, I'm lame in both feet. So he gets on a donkey and rides in with him. Now, he doesn't understand the faithfulness of David toward his dad, Jonathan. Jonathan died when he was just 5 years old, when he might have told stories of what a great guy David is. He hung around his dad Saul far longer than he did with Jonathan. And all Saul wanted to do was kill him. All Saul would say about him is, he's the enemy. He wants this throne that should be yours. So as he's riding into town, can you imagine how long that journey had to be? Thinking that when I arrive, he's probably going to string me up outside the palace walls to show his power over the line of Saul. Now, in his response and interaction with David, I think this is so wonderful. We get a glimpse of when we try to show value to someone from Generation X who experienced a lot of what Mephibosheth experienced. We're going to see how they're going to respond so we can anticipate and know how to show value to them. So Gen Xers, like Mephibosheth, they're going to doubt your intent. When David pulls him in, he says, Mephibosheth, he's excited to see him come. He's excited that there's someone from the line of Jonathan he can show kindness to. This loving kindness, this kindness he's talking about, it's not just, he wants to be nice. It's the word chesed, which means I made a covenant, and buddy, I'm going to fulfill it however I can. He's excited to see Mephibosheth. He gets to show love to Jonathan, to his son. But you see, we can't tell by his response where he says, at your service. We don't know what it was like. We can tell by David's response to that statement how Mephibosheth was thinking. He says, don't be afraid. It's clear he was probably shaking. He thought his days are numbered. So when David's excited to see him, he's excited to string me up and kill me? Like most Gen Xers who've been failed by people, there's got to be a catch. There's got to be a hook here. Yeah, you're schmoozing me. What do you want from me? Yeah, you're bringing me to church. You want my money? Yeah, you want to be friends with me? Is that because you want to get to the people I'm friends with? You want to hang out with me? Is that because you're trying to get in with my boss? What's the catch? What's the hook? Because everybody pretty much through their lifetime had taken care of themselves because they were struggling naturally in their minds to develop a thinking that there's a reason for this. So he's nervous. Just like a Gen Xer is going to be cynical, skeptical about any act of kindness you're going to present to them. Understand that like Mephibosheth, Xers will demand answers. His response to David, when he's so excited to see him, he says, even after David says, I'm going to give you Dad's land back to you, Grandpa's land back to you, and you're going to live here in my house. He says, why should you notice a dead dog like me? You see, he thinks his time's short here. He's asking questions. Xers who don't trust you will ask questions. And what you're going to find is that those questions, even if you answer them well, aren't going to be good enough. Because there's always a hook. There's always a bait and switch. This relationship's for you. It's not for me. Oh, you just want to get your church bigger because numbers matter. You just want to feel good about yourself because you heard something in a sermon. You really don't care about me. You want to look good for your pastor or for your spouse. What's the hook? Remember I said back in college, we asked questions because we just love to ask questions. We valued cynicism. We liked to be cynical in some ways because it was our survival technique. You try to extend kindness to a Gen Xer, they'll wonder what you're up to. They'll ask questions, and I promise you, you can answer 5, 20, 100 questions, and they still probably won't be good enough to convince them of your intentions. Understand that they want answers. Now, here is where God just turned the lights on, opens the door for us to see this is how it works. This is what needs to happen. Watch what David does in response to this question that no doubt is years of questions about where were you and where were people looking. You're going to look out for me now? Where are you coming from right now? Mephibosheth asked him, who am I that you should notice a dead dog like me? And I can see David looking at him, thinking for a second, what do I say? He's had no one. He's had nothing. He's had no one looking out for him. He acknowledged he doesn't have an answer. Or does he? Instead of answering Mephibosheth, Ziba, listen, I want you to go now. Go back to that land. Take it over. Start farming it. Bring in the crops for him to eat. And there's a room just down the hall. He can have that room. I'm going to treat him like my son. He has a place at my table for the rest of his life. How you like that? He didn't acknowledge the question. Because he recognized what Mephibosheth needs and what Gen Xers need. They need prolonged proof. They want to see. They don't ask for it. They won't tell you they want it, but they don't need a quick answer. They don't need sweet talking. They don't need even one invitation or one gentle act or one act of kindness. They need to be shown because you are reprogramming years and years of being forgotten in Mephibosheth. You're reprogramming years and years of being abandoned or presuming they've been abandoned by Gen Xers. And except for an act of God, it will not happen by one act of kindness, one compliment, or one gift from you. So how do we show value based on what we just saw here? How do we show value to a Gen Xer? Get this, church. We need to invite them to our table for life. Invite them into your world. Don't just invite them into your church. If you invite them to church And they're hanging out in this section. But your seat, that's your seat. It's my seat. Nah, that's your seat now. You bring them into your world, you live in that world with them. Did you meet and have this first conversation over coffee or at a luncheon or something? Take them out to lunch. Take them out for coffee once or twice a month to keep bringing them to your table. And make your table close to them. Go to their kids' games. Send their kids a birthday card. Listen, if they want to come and be a part of Trunk or Treat, which we're going to start advertising here in a few weeks, well, I don't usually do Trunk or Treat. Now you do. So listen, you cannot invite them to your table if you won't be at that table for them. Bring them into your world over and over and over again. For life, if that's what it takes, till they find what you found in Jesus Christ. And I promise you, you bring them to that table long enough, they will find life. And that's really what you've been longing for, isn't it? So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to address Gen Xers in just a bit, but the rest of you, millennials, Gen Z, teenagers, boomers, and beyond, I didn't done this in a while. I want to do it today. And I want you to take 2 minutes of just total quiet and listen. There's a blank at the bottom of your paper. What Gen X, or someone between the ages of 38 and 55, does God want you to invite to your table? Which consequently, church, if all is right with you, they will meet him who is already eating at your table. 2 minutes of quiet. Listen. And maybe it's the first name that comes to your mind. Don't talk God out of it. Just write it down and see where God takes you. 2 minutes. As we wrap it up, got a quick word for you Gen Xers. Would you please stand for a second? Born between 65 and 80. That excites me. Because at one point, you took a shot. But listen, I'll make this quick, not to make a scene of you all. Don't be surprised if someone pulls out a seat at their table and invites you to it. But now it's in your court. Those you've been forgotten and abandoned for years. It's up to you to take the risk and take a seat at that table. Because I promise you, if it's with a Dayspring person, what God is doing here, you will find life.